or good evening, everyone. I'm Chago Zapata, and picture this. Now, the war in Afghanistan escalates, or God forbid, Iran decides to wage war against the United States. The U.S. government has to augment military forces in the theater of war, and there aren't enough service members to activate. There aren't enough reservists or whatever. So what are their options? What is the U.S. government's options? First thing that comes to mind is the draft, or direct federal conscription, as it's called by the U.S. government. It's happened before during World War II, all the way up until 1973 in Vietnam. But the idea that young men should be obligated to serve in the military when they turn 18, regardless of the need for their service, has been a point of contention and argument for years now. In 2005, is actually being considered. The Congress was actually considering the draft. Obviously, it got nixed, but it was one of those things that's been out there. Now, for me, I don't believe that Americans should be obligated to serve in the military when they turn 18, mainly because it would damage current military readiness. It would negatively affect morale for all armed forces, and it would cause public outcry. First, though, I think it's important to know what the draft is. The draft was started in 1940 by President Roosevelt. He signed the Selective Training and Service Act, that's what it's called, and which continued through war and peacetime all the way up until 1973, like I said before, during the Vietnam War. After that, it was ended. Now, Congress has to pass legislature, and the president has to sign it in order to actually enact the draft. It's almost all male citizens and male resident aliens have to register through the Selective Service, but in order to be inducted, they have to meet physical, mental, moral, and qualifications in order to join whatever service they're going to join. So whatever the guidelines are for that specific service. Those who don't register before the age of 26, who don't get prosecuted, because you can get prosecuted if you don't register for the Selective Service. But those who don't and aren't prosecuted, they are ineligible for federal financial aid. They're ineligible for citizenship, federal job training, federal jobs, and resident aliens cannot become U.S. citizens. That's from ABC News from a 2005 article. It's my first reference. Okay, now you understand what the draft is. Let's talk about how it negatively affect military readiness and morale. The reason the U.S. military is a force in readiness is because it's an all-volunteer force. Every person currently serving in the military is there because they want to be. They're not being forced to serve. So during the Vietnam War, there were a lot of issues with drugs and discipline and things like that. Things that were people that didn't want to be there were making it difficult for the people that were, those who volunteered or those who wanted to get the job done. And they caused a lot of problems that lasted all the way up until maybe the mid-80s. And so it took more than 10 years to actually get things back under control because of all the drugs and like I said, the lack of discipline. On the other hand, you could also argue that more troops would give the military more soldiers to pit against the enemy, more people to put in the field, especially when the enemy is out there and things are going on and they're attacking American interests throughout the world. The question is, would these people that are forced to serve, would they have the discipline and the desire to get the job done? And I don't believe so. And that's what I believe why I believe that they shouldn't be drafted into the service. Now, morale is vital for mission accomplishment. It's one of those things that you need. You need to have people that have a can-do, positive attitude, that have a willingness and a motivation to succeed and to get the job done. And that's an important job an important part of getting the accomplishing the mission, which is what the military is all about. But again, what would happen with the people that don't want to be there? They would ruin it and cause bad morale for those who do stay their purpose, who do want to serve, who do want to get the job done. and they would negatively affect that. Now, again, one could argue that the people that are drafted, the involuntary volunteers, as I would call them, would get a steady paycheck. They would get their college paid for, the free medical, free dental, 3 square meals a day, a long list of other stuff, other benefits, and they could get because they serve. But is that the price that we want to pay for the problems that they would cause for the service, for the military in the future, and for the possible inability to accomplish the mission? I don't believe so. Okay, so now I've talked about how the draft would negatively affect military readiness and morale, and it's time to talk about what the American people themselves would think. I believe that it would be, to me there's no question in my mind that there would be, the draft would cause a public outcry, a negative public outcry by the American people, much as during the Vietnam War when there were protests. I believe there would be protests, there would be, the political system would be turned on its ear, constituents would flood Congress and the House of Representatives with thousands of complaints and petitions and possibly even threats. That's not taking into account also the social media, the resulting social media blast that would happen because of it. You know, Twitter, Facebook, everything would be just going crazy if the draft were to go into effect. Again, there's always the other side of the argument, and there's this one person. His name is Mayor Kestenbaum. And he's the author of Citizenship and Compulsory Military Service, The Revolutionary Origins of Conscription in the United States. And he said military service is an obligation for every member of the community of citizens. It's their duty. I'm paraphrasing now. He also said it's the citizens' obligation to serve, and it's the government's obligation to compel him to serve. So there's always going to be people that see both, see two sides of that argument. Now, I've talked to you today about how Americans should not be obligated to serve in the military when they turn 18 because it would damage current military readiness, negatively affect morale for all armed services, and cause a public outcry. Of course, as I keep saying, there's always two sides to every argument. And but considering that I served 20 years in the Marines, honorably, I think I got an insider's point of view that makes my view somewhat unique. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bravo. That's pretty good, sir.
Sí, hijo, precisamente a mí me tocó, hijo, todavía. Gracias a Dios no me mandaron.
Sí.